Welcome to the dark side of game design, where silence isn't a pause but a weapon. Today we're dissecting how contemporary horror titles strip away dialogue and let cognitive dissonance do all the heavy lifting, turning player agency into a psychological nightmare that lingers long after you've turned off your console. Picture this. You're standing in an abandoned asylum, flashlight beam cutting through dust-laden corridors, but there's no voice telling you what to do. The only guide, your own instincts and the unsettling emptiness around you. That's the core of silent narrative, a technique that turns ordinary gameplay into a personal psychological thriller. First, let's break down why silence matters in gaming. Dialogue is traditionally our anchor. It provides context, drives plot, and gives us clear objectives. When you strip away those anchors, you're left with raw sensory input, visuals, sound design, subtle environmental cues that forces the player to interpret meaning on their own. This cognitive load isn't just a challenge, it's a conduit for terror. The mind fills gaps with fear because we're wired to anticipate threats. In silent horror, every rustle becomes a potential killer, every flicker a sign of supernatural presence. That unspoken tension is the engine behind what psychologists call cognitive dissonance in gameplay. When your brain expects narrative clarity but receives ambiguity instead, it creates discomfort that amplifies fear. Now let's look at player agency. In most games, you're given missions, quests, or dialogue choices, clear ways to influence outcomes. Silent horror flips this by making the environment itself your tool for decision-making. You must decide whether to explore a dark hallway, backtrack through a collapsed stairwell, or simply stay put and listen. Each choice feels personal because there's no script telling you what's right. You're forced to trust or distrust your own judgment. That sense of ownership turns passive fear into active dread. The terror isn't just in what happens next, it's in how you chose to get there. Think about a game that uses this technique brilliantly. It doesn't need voice acting or cutscene exposition. Instead, it relies on environmental storytelling. A broken mirror reflecting a hallway with no light source, an overturned chair beside a cracked window, these are clues. Your brain hunts for patterns, and when it can't find them, the void becomes terrifying. The game's silence invites you to fill in those blanks with your worst fears. Because there's no script, every moment feels unpredictable. You're never sure if that creak is just wind or a supernatural entity creeping closer. Another layer of depth comes from how silent narratives manipulate pacing. Without dialogue interruptions, the game can maintain a relentless atmosphere. The player moves at their own rhythm. The tension builds in real time, not through scripted beats. This means the horror unfolds organically. You might pause to listen, and that silence itself becomes a moment of dread. Developers use ambient sounds, distant dripping, distant footsteps, to create an audio landscape that feels alive and unpredictable. When those sounds vanish, even briefly, the sudden absence can be more jarring than any spoken line could be. Let's examine how cognitive dissonance is amplified by this silence. Your brain expects narrative coherence. It wants cause and effect. In silent horror, you get a series of stimuli with no clear explanation. That mismatch forces your mind to generate hypotheses. Are those noises from the building itself or something else? Are that flickering lights a sign of electricity failure or an omen? Each hypothesis is a potential fear trigger. Because there's no dialogue to resolve these questions, the dissonance persists, keeping you in a heightened state of alertness and anxiety. This technique also plays with memory. Without explicit storytelling, players rely on their own recollections of what they've seen and heard. The game can then subvert those memories by introducing new, unexpected elements that clash with the player's mental model. That mismatch creates a deeper psychological impact. It feels like your brain is being tricked, which can be more unsettling than any scripted twist. Now let's talk about agency again, but from a different angle: choice consequences. In silent horror games, Every action you take often has no immediate feedback. You might open a door and nothing happens, or you might move an object and trigger a new sound cue. The lack of clear cause-effect loops means you must constantly test the environment, which can be exhausting but also engaging. Because there's no scripted outcome, your choices feel more meaningful. If you survive or not depends entirely on how you interpret those silent signals. Moreover, silence allows for subtlety in storytelling. Instead of shouting plot points at you, the game lets you discover them piece by piece. A note left on a table, a photograph hanging crookedly, an audio log that plays when you're near a certain spot. These small artifacts can be pieced together to form a narrative, but only if you pay attention. That slow revelation mirrors real life's way of processing trauma. You don't understand everything at once. It takes time and repeated exposure. This mirroring can intensify the emotional impact because the horror feels less like a manufactured scare and more like an ongoing psychological assault. Consider how developers use silence to create personal dread. By removing dialogue, they force players into solitary spaces where the only companion is their own thoughts. That isolation is a potent tool for fear. It mimics real-life scenarios of being alone in a dark place, which many people find inherently scary. The game leverages that primal instinct by giving you no external reassurance, no NPC telling you it's safe or we're okay. Every moment becomes a test of your mental resilience. Let's also explore the role of sound design. In silent horror, sound is often the only narrative driver. A subtle wind moaning through broken windows can signal an approaching threat, while a sudden silence after a noise can be equally menacing. The absence of dialogue allows ambient sounds to take center stage. They become cues that guide you, but also traps that mislead you. That duality, sound as both comfort and warning, heightens cognitive dissonance because your brain must constantly reassess what each sound means. Now think about how this technique changes the emotional payoff. In conventional games with dialogue-driven plots, you often feel relief when a boss is defeated or a mystery solved. Silent horror flips that. The resolution might be ambiguous, leaving you with lingering questions and unease. That open-endedness can lead to post-game anxiety. Players might replay levels, trying to piece together every silent clue, only to find new mysteries each time. The game becomes a psychological loop, where fear is never fully resolved, but constantly refreshed by the absence of narrative closure. Finally, let's consider why this method feels so modern and relevant. As gamers become more media literate, they're less likely to be shocked by flashy graphics or obvious jump scares. They crave immersion and agency. Silent narrative satisfies that craving by giving players control over meaning-making. It turns the game into a collaborative storytelling experience where the player's mind fills in gaps, creating a uniquely personal horror story each time. In summary, silent narrative in contemporary horror games harnesses cognitive dissonance to amplify fear by removing dialogue and forcing players to interpret ambiguous environmental cues. This absence heightens agency because every decision is self-driven, making the experience intensely personal. Sound design becomes the sole narrator, guiding yet misleading, while memory manipulation deepens psychological impact. The result, a horror that lingers in your mind long after you've powered down because it's not just a story, it's an echo of your own fears, amplified by silence. What part of silent horror made you feel most unsettled? Drop your thoughts below and hit subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology behind gaming terror.